You want to know what loneliness actually sounds like? It's not crying. It's not even silence, really. It's the sound of a refrigerator humming at 2 in the afternoon in a house where nobody's coming home. That low electric drone just filling up the space where a voice used to be. I lived with that sound for 14 months after my husband passed. 14 months of that hum being the loudest thing in my life. And now I wake up to roosters and somebody arguing about whether we need more calamansi for the fish. And I swear to you, some mornings I just lie there in my bed and smile before I even open my eyes. Because the house is alive. This house in Dumaguete, Philippines, where 3 widows from 3 different American states split the rent 3 ways and somehow built something none of us expected to find again. My name is Gail Brennan. I'm 67 years old. I was born and raised in Terre Haute, Indiana, lived most of my adult life in suburban Columbus, Ohio, and right now I'm sitting on a terrace overlooking a mango tree in Negros Oriental province. My rent is 6,000 pesos a month. That's about $180 at the exchange rate we've been getting. And I share this house with 2 other women, Connie Salazar, who's 64, from Albuquerque, and Diane Pokorny, who's 71, from outside Portland, Oregon. Between the 3 of us, we have 7 grandchildren, 4 bad knees, 2 sets of reading glasses that we constantly mix up, and 1 house that none of us want to leave. I should probably start with how I ended up here, because it wasn't some grand plan. It wasn't one of those retirement seminars or a documentary I watched. It was more like a slow unraveling of the life I thought I was going to have, and then a very weird chain of events that led me to 2 strangers on the internet. My husband, Tom, died in March of 2021, pancreatic cancer. From diagnosis to the funeral was 11 weeks. That's a number I'll never forget. 11 weeks to say goodbye to 41 years of marriage. Tom was the kind of guy who handled everything, not in a controlling way. He just liked being useful. He paid the bills, scheduled the car maintenance, knew which neighbor to call when the sump pump broke, and when he was gone, I didn't just lose my husband, I lost the infrastructure of my daily life, everything I'd leaned on without even realizing I was leaning. The first 6 months were a blur. People brought casseroles. My daughter drove up from Cincinnati every other weekend. My son called from Denver. The church ladies checked in. But then the casseroles stopped, and the calls got shorter, and the visits got further apart. Not because anyone stopped caring. They had their own lives. That's not a complaint. It's just the truth. Grief has a shelf life in other people's minds. Yours keeps going, but the world around you moves on, and suddenly you're standing in a Kroger parking lot at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, realizing you have nowhere to be and no one expecting you. I started spending too much time online. Facebook groups mostly, widow support groups at first, which were helpful for a while, then honestly kind of suffocating. Everyone processing, everyone sharing, which is important, but I needed something that looked forward instead of backward. I stumbled into expat groups almost by accident. Somebody in one of the widow groups mentioned that she was thinking about moving to Mexico and linked to a forum about retiring abroad on a budget. I clicked it the way you click anything at midnight when you can't sleep. Not seriously, just killing time. But I kept reading, and the more I read, the more something shifted in my chest. These were real people, not rich people, not adventurers, just regular Americans on Social Security, who had picked up and moved to places like Ecuador, Portugal, Thailand, the Philippines. And they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They were eating well, seeing doctors without going bankrupt, making friends, learning new things. They had purpose again. That word kept coming up, purpose. I want to be honest with you about what my life looked like financially at that point, because I think that matters. Tom and I weren't wealthy. He worked 32 years for a company that made industrial gaskets. I worked part-time at a pediatric dentist's office for 15 years, then stayed home, then went back to work as a receptionist at a real estate office until I was 62. Between my Social Security and the small survivor benefit from Tom, I was pulling in about $1,400 a month. The house in Columbus was paid off, but property taxes were $3,200 a year. Utilities were running close to $300 a month in winter, and everything, groceries, gas, insurance, just kept going up. I wasn't in crisis, but I was shrinking, cutting things, not going places. The math of my life was subtraction. One night, in one of those expat Facebook groups, I saw a post from a woman named Connie. She'd written this long, honest message about being a 63-year-old widow in Albuquerque, living on about $1,200 a month, and wondering if the Philippines would be realistic for someone like her. No nonsense, no drama, just real questions about money, safety, healthcare, visas. I remember reading it and thinking, that's me. She's me in a different city. So I commented, just said something like, I'm in the same boat, following this thread. And she messaged me privately. That first conversation lasted 3 hours. We just talked about our husbands, about being alone, about the fear that this was just going to be it, just managing decline until the end. Connie told me she'd been a school counselor for 26 years, that her husband, Miguel, had died of a heart attack while coaching their grandson's Little League game, that she'd sold the house because the memories were too thick in every room, and that she was renting a one-bedroom apartment and feeling like she was just waiting. Waiting for what? I asked her. And she said, that's exactly the problem. I don't know. We started talking every day, video calls mostly. We'd research together, comparing the cost of living in Cebu versus Davao versus Dumaguete, watching YouTube videos of expats giving house tours, reading blog posts about the retirement visa, the SRV, which stands for the Special Resident Retirees Visa. We made spreadsheets. Connie's a spreadsheet person, God bless her. She had tabs for everything: rent ranges, electric costs, food budgets, hospital ratings, distance to airports. We were like two women planning a heist, except the thing we were stealing was our own lives back. About 2 months into our research, Connie found Diane, or rather, Diane found us. She'd commented on one of Connie's posts in the same expat group, something about how she'd actually visited Dumaguete twice already and could answer questions. Connie pulled her into our little circle, and suddenly we were three. Diane was different from us, louder, more direct. She'd been a nurse for 38 years, worked ICU and ER in Portland, and had the kind of bluntness that comes from decades of dealing with emergencies. Her husband Frank had passed 4 years earlier, longer ago than either of us, from complications after a stroke. She'd already done the deep grieving, or at least a version of it, and she was more in a mode of, I know what I want, and I'm tired of being cautious about it. She told us flat out, I visited Dumaguete twice. Once for 2 weeks, once for a month. I love it. I'm going. The only reason I haven't gone yet is that I didn't want to do it completely alone. And that was the moment, really. That sentence. I didn't want to do it completely alone. Because neither did I. Neither did Connie. We were all independent enough to manage, stubborn enough to try, but honest enough to admit that going halfway around the world by yourself at 60-something is a different proposition than doing it with people who understand what you've lost and what you're looking for. We spent another 3 months planning. Diane had the advantage of already knowing Dumaguete, so she guided a lot of our decisions. She explained why she preferred it over Cebu City. Smaller, safer, more walkable, a university town with good hospitals, but without the traffic and chaos. She told us about Silliman University Medical Center, which she said was genuinely good. She talked about the boulevard along the waterfront, the Saturday market, the way the pace of life there was just different. Nobody's rushing, she said. Nobody's honking at you. People actually say good morning and mean it. The house question came up early. We'd all assumed we'd get separate apartments, maybe in the same building or neighborhood. But Connie, always the practical one, ran the numbers and said, look, a decent one-bedroom apartment in Dumaguete runs about 10 to 15,000 pesos, but I've seen 3-bedroom houses with a garden for 18 to 22,000. If we split that 3 ways, we're each paying less than we would alone, and we get more space. It made sense on paper, but we had a real conversation about whether it made sense in reality. Living with someone is not the same as being friends with someone online. We talked about boundaries, about bathroom schedules, about what happens if somebody wants to have a guest over, about noise and cooking smells and sleep habits. Diane, being Diane, said, I snore like a diesel truck, and I'm not apologizing for it, which actually made us all laugh and somehow broke the tension. We agreed to try it for 6 months. If it didn't work, no hard feelings, we'd find separate places. Connie found the house through a local agent Diane had connected with on her previous trips, a Filipino woman named Lorna, who handled rentals in the Bantayan area of Dumaguete, not far from the main road to Valencia. The house was a 2-story concrete place, painted this kind of faded yellow, with 3 bedrooms upstairs, a shared bathroom on each floor, a kitchen dining area, a small sala, that's what they call a living room, and a walled-in yard with a mango tree and some bougainvillea growing wild along the fence. The rent was 18,000 pesos a month, split 3 ways, 6,000 each, $180. I remember the first time I saw it on a video call with Lorna. It wasn't fancy. The tiles were a little uneven. The kitchen counter was that old-style laminate, and the windows had these steel-frame jalousie slats instead of proper glass panes. But there was light pouring in everywhere, and through the kitchen window you could see the mango tree, and beyond it a neighbor's roof, and past that just sky. I looked at that sky and something in me just said, go. I sold almost everything. That was harder than I expected, and easier than I feared, if that makes sense. 41 years of accumulation. Tom's recliner. The dining table we bought when we were 29. Christmas ornaments the kids made in school. I kept what mattered. Photos, a few of Tom's things, my mother's ring, and put it in 2 boxes at my daughter's house. The rest went to estate sale, Goodwill, the neighbors. I put the house on the market in April of 2023, and it sold in 3 weeks for $212. After paying off the small remaining equity line, I netted about $198,000, which I put into a savings account and a conservative bond fund. That became my safety net, my if everything goes sideways money. I landed in Dumaguete on June 14, 2023. Connie had arrived 4 days earlier. Diane had been there for 2 weeks already, getting the house set up. When the tricycle pulled up to that faded yellow house, and I saw Diane standing in the doorway waving, this woman I'd only known through a screen for months, I cried. Not sad crying, just the overwhelm of realizing you actually did it. You actually left behind the humming refrigerator and the empty parking lots and the slow erosion of yourself, and you got on a plane and you came. That first night, the 3 of us sat in the kitchen, which Diane had already stocked with essentials from the public market, and we ate chicken adobo that a neighbor had brought over. Apparently, Lorna had told her tenants 3 Americana widows were moving in, and the whole street knew before we did, and we drank San Miguel beer, and Connie made a toast. She said, to not waiting anymore, and we clinked our bottles together, and the mango tree rustled outside, and I thought, this is the first night in almost 2 years that I haven't dreaded the morning. The first few weeks were an adjustment, and I'd be lying if I said otherwise. You can research a place until your eyes blur, but living there is a different education entirely. The heat was the first thing. I knew the Philippines was tropical. That's not a surprise. But knowing it intellectually and feeling it in your bones at 7 in the morning when you're already sweating through your shirt are 2 different things. Dumaguete sits right near the coast of Negros Island, so you get sea breezes, but the humidity is something else. Diane, who'd been there before, just kept saying, you'll acclimate. Give it 3 weeks. She was right, mostly. Your body does adjust. But I still haven't made peace with the way my glasses fog up every time I step outside after being in an air-conditioned room. We only have 1 air conditioning unit, by the way. It's in the sala downstairs. We decided early on that we'd keep the electric bill manageable, and aircon is the biggest variable in your power costs here. Our electricity runs about 3,000 pesos a month, around $54, split 3 ways. Each bedroom has a ceiling fan, and we all bought these little clip-on fans from the hardware store on Purtice's Street for maybe 200 pesos each. Honestly, you get used to the fans. At night, with the windows open and the fan going, it's not bad. Sometimes there's a breeze off the Bohol Sea that comes through and it's actually lovely. Other times, in April and May when it's at its hottest, we camp out in the sala with the aircon cranked and watch old movies on Diane's laptop. Let me walk you through what a normal day looks like, because I think people are curious about the rhythm of it. I'm usually up by 5:30. The roosters around here have no concept of weekends. They're crowing at 4:45, and after a while you just stop fighting it. I come downstairs, make coffee. We buy local beans from a place in the public market, and I use a little stovetop mocha pot that Connie brought from Albuquerque, and I sit on the front step and watch the street come alive. There's a family across the road with 4 kids, and the youngest one, this little girl named Joy, she always waves at me. Every single morning, never misses. That wave is worth more than you'd think. Connie's usually up next, around 6 or 6:15. She's the breakfast person among us. She genuinely enjoys cooking in the morning, which is a gift because I've never been a morning cook. She'll make scrambled eggs with tomatoes, or sometimes she'll do these Filipino-style fried rice things, sinangag they call it, with garlic fried rice and a fried egg on top. She learned it from our neighbor, Ate Neneng. Ate is an honorific here. It means older sister, and you use it for women who are older than you, or just as a sign of respect. Ate Neneng is maybe 50, and she's become one of our closest friends on the street. She taught Connie how to cook pinakbet, which is this vegetable dish with bitter melon and eggplant and shrimp paste, and now Connie makes it better than I've ever tasted anywhere. Diane rolls downstairs around 7. She's the night owl among us, often up reading until midnight, so she sleeps later. She comes down, pours coffee, grunts a greeting. Diane is not a morning conversationalist, and sits with her phone for about 20 minutes scrolling through news. Then she comes alive around 7:30 and becomes the most talkative person you've ever met. It's like a switch flips. We joke about it constantly. Pre-coffee Diane and post-coffee Diane are 2 different human beings. After breakfast, we usually scatter for the morning. I like to walk. There's a path along the boulevard. Rizal Boulevard, it's called. This beautiful seaside promenade that runs along the waterfront, and in the morning it's full of joggers, fishermen coming in with their catch, older Filipino couples doing their exercise walk. It's about a 20-minute walk from our house, and I do it maybe 4 or 5 times a week. I've lost 11 pounds since moving here, and my doctor back in Ohio would be shocked because she'd been telling me to exercise more for years. Turns out the trick wasn't discipline. It was having somewhere beautiful to walk to. Connie usually spends her mornings on what she calls her projects. She volunteers 2 mornings a week at a community center near Silliman University, where she helps with an English literacy program for adults. She was a school counselor, remember, so working with people learning and growing is in her DNA. She found it through a connection at the Dumaguete Expat group. There's a pretty active community of foreigners here, maybe 300 or 400, a mix of Americans, Australians, Europeans, and they organize things. Potlucks, beach trips, charity projects. Connie plugged into that fast. Diane does her own thing. She's the most independent of the three of us, which makes sense. She lived alone the longest after her husband passed, and she's comfortable with solitude in a way that Connie and I are still learning. But her version of independence isn't isolation. She goes to the market most mornings, and she's become a regular at several of the stalls. There's a fish vendor named Kuya Eddie. Kuya is like ate, but for men, it means older brother, who saves the best bangus for her because she always shows up early and pays fair without haggling too aggressively. Bangus is milkfish, and it's become one of our household staples. Diane marinates it in vinegar and garlic, a preparation they call dyeing nabangus, and pan-fries it, and the smell fills the entire house. It's one of those smells I'll associate with this chapter of my life forever. The money aspect is something people always want to know about, so let me be specific. Our monthly expenses, each, break down roughly like this. Rent, 6,000 pesos, about $180. Electricity, our share, about 1,000 pesos, around $18. Water, almost nothing, maybe 150 pesos each, $3. Internet. We have a fiber connection from Converge, which works surprisingly well. That's about 1,500 split 3 ways, so 500 each, $9. Groceries. This varies, but I spend about 5,000 to 6,000 pesos a month on food, roughly $100 to $110, and that's eating well. Fresh fish, vegetables, rice, eggs, fruit. Mangoes here cost almost nothing in season, and the bananas are incredible, not those pale things from the Kroger. We eat out maybe once or twice a week, usually at local carinderias, small neighborhood eateries, where a meal costs 60 to 80 pesos. That's barely over $1. So my total monthly spend, all in, usually falls somewhere between $400 and $450. That includes everything: rent, food, utilities, transportation, the occasional treat like a coffee at Cafe Mamia on the boulevard, or a weekend trip to Apo Island, which is this incredible little diving spot about a 30-minute boat ride from the coast. On my Social Security of $1,400 a month, I'm saving more than I ever did working in Ohio. That still blows my mind when I say it out loud. Healthcare was one of my biggest concerns before moving, and I want to address it honestly because I know it worries people. The Philippines doesn't have Medicare. If you're an American retiree here, you're either paying out of pocket or buying private insurance, and the private insurance options for people our age are limited and expensive. What most expats in Dumaguete do, and what we do, is pay out of pocket. And before you panic about that, let me give you some real numbers. I went to Silliman University Medical Center for a general checkup about 3 months after arriving. Blood work, urinalysis, chest x-ray, consultation with an internist. Total cost, about 2,300 pesos. That's $41. In Columbus, even with Medicare supplemental, my co-pays and out-of-pocket for a similar workup would have been more than that. Diane needed a dental crown replaced last October. She went to a dentist on Loxon Street that another expat recommended, and it cost her 8,000 pesos, $144. She said the same procedure was quoted at over $1,200 in Portland before insurance. Now, if something catastrophic happened, a stroke, a major surgery, cancer treatment, that's different. That's the risk, and we're all aware of it. Each of us keeps a dedicated emergency fund for medical situations. Diane, being a former nurse, is the most pragmatic about it. She says, I've worked in hospitals my whole life. I know what can go wrong, but I also know that worrying about worst-case scenarios can stop you from living, and I'm done with that. Her perspective is that the quality of daily life here, the low stress, the good food, the walking, the social engagement, is itself a health intervention. I think she's right. Let me tell you about a moment that made me understand what this house means to us. It was around September, about 3 months in. I'd been having a rough few days. The anniversary of Tom's diagnosis was coming up, and grief doesn't follow a calendar, but your body remembers anyway. I was quiet, withdrawn, picking at my food, going to my room early, and I didn't say anything because I'm from that generation of Midwestern women who don't burden people with their feelings. On the third night, there was a knock on my bedroom door. Connie. She came in with 2 cups of chocolate. That's this thick Filipino hot chocolate made from tablea, these little pucks of pure cacao. And she just sat on the edge of my bed and said, You don't have to talk, but I'm here. And then Diane appeared in the doorway with a bag of chicharron, fried pork rinds, and said, I brought snacks. Whatever this is, we're doing it together. And we sat there, the 3 of us on my bed, eating pork rinds and drinking chocolate, and I cried, and they just let me cry. They didn't try to fix it. They didn't say, he's in a better place. They just sat with me in it, because they knew. They'd both been there. They understood the specific weight of that kind of sadness in a way that nobody else in my life, not even my own children, fully could. That night changed something. It was the night I stopped thinking of this as an arrangement and started thinking of it as a family, not a replacement for the family I already have. My kids are my kids, my grandchildren are my world, but an additional family, a chosen one, built on shared understanding and the daily act of showing up. The dynamics of 3 people living together are interesting. There's a reason the number 3 has always been complicated in human relationships. 2 people can create an equilibrium, but 3 introduces variables. We've had to learn how to navigate that. Early on, there was a small tension between Connie and Diane about kitchen cleanliness. Connie is meticulous, wipes down counters immediately, washes dishes as she goes, everything in its place. Diane is more of a, I'll deal with it later person, and her later is sometimes the next morning. It sounds trivial, but in a shared living space, trivial things become significant if you don't address them. We had a house meeting about it. Diane proposed it, actually, which I give her credit for. She said, let's just talk about this before it becomes a thing. So we sat at the kitchen table and laid it out. Connie explained that disorder stresses her out. It's tied to her need for control. which she traces back to growing up in a chaotic household. Diane explained that rigid rules stress her out. She spent decades in high-pressure environments where everything was protocol, and home should be different. I mostly listened, which is my role a lot of the time. I'm the mediator. The school counselor and the ER nurse don't always see the world the same way, and the real estate receptionist from Ohio is somehow the one who finds the middle ground. We landed on a system. Each person has a kitchen day where they're responsible for cleanup. On your day, you clean to your own standard. If something genuinely bothers you on someone else's day, you can do it yourself without comment or bring it up gently. It sounds so simple, but having the conversation, the honest, adult, no one's the villain conversation, made all the difference. We haven't had a real conflict since. Small irritations, sure. Diane's snoring through the wall. Connie's habit of narrating everything she reads on her phone out loud. My tendency to leave my reading glasses in random places and then ask everyone to help me find them. But these are the textures of living with people. They're signs of life. And after the silence I lived in, I'll take every one of them. One of the things that surprised me most about living here is how much the local community has embraced us. We are, without question, an oddity. 3 older white women in a residential neighborhood that's almost entirely Filipino. We stand out. But the response hasn't been suspicion or resentment. It's been warmth. Genuine, sometimes overwhelming warmth. The concept of community in the Philippines is different from what I knew in suburban Ohio. In Columbus, I could go weeks without having a real conversation with a neighbor beyond waving from the driveway. Here, our neighbors know our names, our schedules, our preferences. When Connie was sick with a stomach bug in August, 3 different neighbors brought food. Not casserole dish, sympathy card food. Just, hey, ate Connie, I made arroz caldo, here's a pot for you, food. Arroz caldo is this ginger heavy rice porridge that's basically the Filipino equivalent of chicken soup for the soul. She got 3 pots of it in one day. There's a concept here called bayanihan. It comes from an old tradition where an entire community would literally lift a house and carry it to a new location when a family needed to move. It's come to mean communal cooperation, the idea that you look out for each other, not because you expect something back, but because that's how life works. I've experienced it in small ways dozens of times. Kuya Bert from 2 houses down fixed our leaking faucet and refused payment. Joy's mother, Ate Mila, watches our house when we travel and won't take a centavo for it. The trike drivers in the neighborhood know where we live and sometimes won't charge us for the ride if it's just a short hop. We try to reciprocate, of course. Connie bakes banana bread using the Saba bananas from the market, which are starchier and sweeter than what you get in the States, and distributes loaves around the street. Diane helps Ate Nenning's mother with basic health questions, checking blood pressure, explaining medications, things she can do with her nursing background that would cost money at a clinic. And I've become the unofficial English tutor for a few of the older kids on the street. Joy's brother, who's 12, wants to work in a hotel someday, and his English is already good, but he wants it to be American good, as he says. So we practice together on weekday afternoons, sitting on our front step, going over pronunciation and idioms. He's teaching me Bisaya in return. My accent is apparently hilarious to everyone within earshot. Let me talk about what I didn't expect, because people ask, what's hard about it? And they expect me to say the food or the heat or being far from family. And yes, those things have their moments. But what's actually hardest, the thing nobody warns you about, is the guilt. I feel guilty for being happy. That sounds strange, I know. But when you've spent 2 years defining yourself by loss, by being Tom's widow, by being the person that terrible thing happened to, and then suddenly you're laughing at dinner and exploring waterfalls on weekends, and genuinely looking forward to tomorrow, there's this voice that whispers, "Is this allowed? Are you betraying something?" Connie has the same voice. We've talked about it. She says she sometimes feels like enjoying life in Dumaguete means she's leaving Miguel behind, like her happiness is a form of forgetting. Diane, characteristically, has a different take. She says, "Frank would be furious with me if I sat in Portland being miserable just to prove I loved him. The best way I can honor him is by living fully. That's what he'd want." And I think she's right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your gut are different timelines. The guilt fades. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes softer, more like a tender spot than a wound. And having 2 other women who understand that exact texture of emotion, who can say "I know" and mean it with their whole body, that's the thing no financial spreadsheet or cost of living comparison can capture. We've been here about 18 months now, and the question everyone from home asks is, "Are you staying?" And the answer for all 3 of us is yes. Not forever and ever yes, because I've learned not to make promises like that to the universe. But yes for now, and yes for the foreseeable future, and yes in the way that means this is home. There have been changes since we arrived, small upgrades to the house that make it more ours. Connie bought a used bookshelf from a furniture shop near the Kogon market, paid 800 pesos for it, about $14, and now our sala has an actual reading corner. Diane invested in a proper water filtration system, a 5-stage unit that cost about 4,000 pesos installed, so we don't have to keep buying water jugs. I hung curtains. That was my contribution. I found this fabric at a textile shop on San Jose Street. It's got these subtle floral patterns in blue and cream. And Ate Nenning's niece, who does alterations from her house, sewed them into curtains for 500 pesos. The house looks different now than it did when we arrived. It looks lived in. It looks loved. We've also traveled a bit within the Philippines. That's one of the advantages of being based in Dumaguete. It's positioned well for island hopping. We took the ferry to Siquijor Island for a weekend, which is this mystical little island known for folk healing and gorgeous white sand beaches. The ferry from the Dumaguete port costs about 250 pesos, less than $5, and it's only an hour ride. We stayed in a little guest house for 700 pesos a night per person, walked along the beach, watched the sunset, and Diane swam in the ocean while Connie and I sat on the shore and watched her like nervous mothers. Diane is fearless in water. She grew up spending summers at the Oregon coast, and she still body surfs at 71. We also went to Cebu City for a weekend to do some shopping and eat at restaurants we'd been reading about. Cebu is a proper city, traffic, malls, noise, and it made all three of us appreciate Dumaguete more. There's a reason we chose a smaller city. The pace matters. When your whole previous life was structured around busyness and obligation, what you need isn't more stimulation, it's space to breathe. Dumaguete gives us that. Let me talk about the social side of expat life here, because it's a real factor. Dumaguete has a significant expat community, and within that community there's a subset of retirees who've formed genuine friendships. We attend a weekly coffee meetup at a cafe on Flores Avenue. About 15 to 20 expats show up, mostly American and Australian, ages ranging from 50s to 80s. We've made good friends there. There's a retired teacher from Michigan named Howard who tells the worst jokes you've ever heard and somehow makes you laugh anyway. There's an Australian couple, Marg and Les, who've been here 9 years and know everything about everything. They're the ones who told us about the best place to get our visa paperwork processed and which immigration officer is the friendliest. There are also expats we've chosen to keep distance from. I'll be honest about this because it's part of the reality. Not everyone who moves abroad does it for healthy reasons. Some people come here because they're running from something. Debts, legal troubles, relationships gone wrong, and they bring that energy with them. There are bitter expats, the ones who complain about everything Filipino while living off the affordability the Philippines provides. We steer clear of that crowd. Life's too short, and we didn't come here to sit in a bar with unhappy people criticizing the country that's given us this second chance. The relationship between expats and locals is something I think about a lot. There's a power dynamic that comes with being a foreigner in a developing country. We're not wealthy by American standards, but here our Social Security income puts us solidly above most of our neighbors. That creates a responsibility. Connie feels this strongly. Her counselor's instincts kick in, and she's adamant that we not become lady bountifuls who throw money around and create dependency. Instead, we try to participate in the economy fairly. We pay reasonable prices for things, not the inflated foreigner price, but also not haggling every vendor down to the bone. We tip when tipping is appropriate. We support the local sari-sari store, that's the tiny neighborhood convenience shop, instead of always going to the big grocery chains. Filipinos, in my experience, are among the most hospitable people on the planet. I don't say that as a cliché. I say it as someone who has been personally overwhelmed by the kindness directed at 3 strange women who showed up on their street. But I'm also aware that hospitality can mask discomfort, and that not every smiling face means everything is fine. There are moments when I know we're the subject of neighborhood gossip, when I sense that our presence is seen as unusual, maybe even intrusive, no matter how warmly we're received. Cultural sensitivity isn't a one-time lesson. It's an ongoing practice. I've learned some Bisaya, the local language, which helps enormously. Not fluent, not even close, but enough to greet people properly, to thank them, to ask basic questions at the market. Mayong buntag, good morning. Salamat kaayo, thank you very much. Pila ni? How much is this? The reaction when a 67-year-old white woman busts out even rudimentary Bisaya is priceless. People light up. It signals effort. It says, I'm not just passing through, I'm trying to be here. I want to address something that I know will be in people's minds watching this. 3 widows living together in the Philippines. It sounds like a movie. People have literally said to me, that's like a movie, or you should write a book. And I understand why it seems novel, or heartwarming, or even quirky. But from the inside, it doesn't feel like a story. It feels like Tuesday. It feels like washing dishes and hanging laundry on the line and arguing about whether the mango is ripe enough to pick yet. It feels ordinary, and that ordinariness is the whole point. Because for each of us, for a long time after we lost our husbands, nothing felt ordinary. Everything felt like a performance of normalcy, like you were acting the part of a person who was fine. Here, we've actually become fine. Not through some revelation or therapy breakthrough, but through the accumulation of regular days lived in the company of people who get it. My daughter Laura has visited once. She came for 10 days in November, and I was nervous about it. Nervous she'd judge the house, the neighborhood, the life. She's a corporate project manager in Cincinnati, very polished, very organized, and I worried she'd see the uneven tiles and the geckos on the ceiling and think her mother had lost her mind. Instead, she cried. She stood in our kitchen on the first morning, watching me make coffee while Connie cut papaya, and Diane argued with Kuya Eddie over the phone about fish delivery, and she cried. She told me later, Mom, you're more alive than I've seen you in 5 years. I didn't realize how much of you had gone away until I saw you come back. My son, Kevin, in Denver hasn't visited yet, but we video call every week, and he's supportive. He was more hesitant at first. Mom, the Philippines? Really? But when I explain the costs and show him the house on camera, and he sees that I'm eating well and sleeping well and laughing, he relaxes. He says he'll come next year. I told him to bring the grandkids. This country is incredible for children. The warmth of the people, the beaches, the adventure of it. Connie's kids have been similarly supportive after initial skepticism. Her daughter Angela flew over in January for a week and ended up extending to 2 weeks because she was having such a good time. She told Connie, I think you found the cheat code, which made Connie laugh because Connie doesn't even know what a cheat code is in the original sense. Diane's son is the most distant, not geographically but emotionally. He lives in Sacramento, and they have a complicated relationship that preceded her move. She says the Philippines didn't cause the distance, it just revealed what was already there. That's a harder part of her story, and she's working through it. 18 months in, I want to tell you what it's like now. Today, this morning, before I sat down to talk to you, I woke up at 5:30. Roosters. Coffee on the step. Joy waved. Connie made garlic rice. Diane grunted, then came alive. I walked along Rizal Boulevard, watched the fishing boats come in, bought fresh lumpia wraps from a vendor near the Freedom Park for 50 pesos, came home, sat under the mango tree with a book. Nenning came over to drop off a bag of calamansi from her tree. We talked about the fiesta coming up next month. The city celebrates its founding with parades and street dancing, and we've been invited to ride on a community float, which I'm both excited and terrified about. This afternoon, I'll work with Joy's brother on his English. Tonight, the three of us are planning to walk to the boulevard for the sunset, maybe get Halo Hollow from that place Diane likes. Halo Hollow is this incredible shaved ice dessert with sweet beans and leche flan and ube ice cream and about 12 other things piled in a glass. It's absurd and delicious. This is my life. $180 a month for a room in a house with two women who started as strangers and became the closest thing I have to sisters. 400-something dollars total, all in, for a life that feels expansive instead of contracted. A life where I am known, where my grief is understood, where my laughter is shared, where the question isn't, what are you waiting for, but what should we do today? I'm not naive. I know this isn't for everyone. I know there are risks, healthcare emergencies, political instability, the sheer distance from family. I know some people would look at our house and see something modest, maybe even rough. I know the immigration situation requires diligence. We're on tourist visas that we extend every 2 months at the Bureau of Immigration office in town, which costs about 3,000 pesos per extension, and eventually we'll need to look into the SRV, or the new retirement visa options. There are bureaucratic realities, and they're not always smooth. But here's what I know with absolute certainty. I was disappearing in Ohio, slowly, quietly, politely disappearing, and now I'm here, in a faded yellow house in Dumaguete, with two women who saved my life by simply saying, "Come with us." The refrigerator in this house hums too. Every refrigerator does, but I can't hear it anymore because this house is too full of voices, too full of life, too full of the specific beautiful noise of three people who chose each other, who chose this place, who chose to stop waiting and start living. None of us are lonely anymore. That's not the tagline of a movie, it's just the truth.